Cryptozoology is believed by many to be a lost art. Most scholars hold that only the very few who have taken part in its study would know how the knowledge was gathered, but they are unable to account for where it came from or how it was obtained, and even fewer have ever been able to determine why certain pieces, often small things in themselves, were found. With that in mind, I want to draw your attention to the newest member of the cryptozoological family, recently confirmed by yours truly. He's known as the Grand Peepaw. It all began a few short weeks ago when, walking through the woods, I saw him. He was about as big as a man at this point, with long droopy ears and his nose sticking straight out into the air. His eyes shone like dull jewels, but his fur was so stark white that even though he was sitting down, he could almost be mistaken for a tree trunk with bright moss on top. It didn't take me long to realize what he was. My dad had told me stories about Grand Peepaws before his accident. They're beautiful, he always said. They're intelligent creatures who live to help and protect others. They can sense death around them, and they don't have the ability to change their form without killing first. I'd never seen one myself. The stories always went on, describing the ways that the Peepaw could manipulate time and space and change reality at will. My father would tell me that, if I listened closely enough, I might find a clue that could tell me more about how to do exactly those things myself. Nervously, while watching the Grand Peepaw from afar, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick message to my dad asking about it. "I wish," he'd written back, "that the Peepaws knew more about humans than just their appearance." The Grand Peepaw didn't seem to notice anything strange about me at first. He sat there in the woods looking at nothing in particular, occasionally making little noises and shaking himself to rid his being of leaves. After a while, however, he got up slowly, stood stock still, and turned his head. Slowly, his glowing eyes fell on me. "Who's there?" he asked. His voice was deeper than my mother's, rougher too. If you had told me I would ever meet someone whose voice sounded this way, I never would have believed you, but here I am. As soon as he spoke, I felt scared. For some reason, the idea of talking to the Grand Peepaw had not even crossed my mind until then. Now that he'd addressed me, my legs suddenly seemed to refuse to work properly. Instead of answering, I took a couple steps backward, tripping over a root in the process. "What's wrong? Who are you?" he demanded. "Spit it out, now!" I wanted to run away, but my feet refused to move. Then, another figure emerged from the trees behind the Grand Peepaw. She was small, dressed in dark blue jeans and a green shirt. Her long hair was tied up, but her bangs framed her face, casting shadows across her cheeks. "Who is it, Peepaw?" she questioned. "It's nobody," said the creature. "Go wait in the car." His voice was cold, yet strangely soft, like water. There was something about the tone that made my skin crawl. The Grand Peepaw turned toward the girl. His fur bristled and he let out a threatening growl. "Get away, Sarah, I think he's homeless." Despite his best attempts, I could see past his tricks. He was terrified. He started backing up again, his eyes frantically searching for an escape route. But he couldn't run forever. I knew I had to capture this moment for all to see. Frantically, I raised my phone toward him, nervously flicking through my apps in a desperate attempt to find the camera. When his image appeared on the screen, he looked at me incredulously. Without saying a word, I snapped the photo and showed it to him. He reached out and snatched my phone from my hands, holding it close to his face. "Leave my family alone, creep! I'll call the cops!" he shouted. "Oh, really?" I retorted, fully aware that creatures of the forest had no legal recourse against superior, mortal men. But just then, with a swift flick of his wrist, he flung my phone far into the distance. "Let's go, Sarah," he hooted, scooping up his youngling and retreating into the dark of his wooded realm. As he fled, I felt a devilish grin turn to a smile on my face. I knew that, despite not capturing him in the flesh, I had managed to trap his spirit, and he was to grant me my wishes whether or not he intended to do so. With a flash, I jolted in the direction of my phone, knowing that with this evidence, the scientific community would finally believe the truth. After dropping to the floor of the forest and rummaging through the twigs and leaves, however, my heart sank. Gripping the small rectangle that was the essence of my life with both hands, I realized the worst tricks of fate had been bestowed upon me. The phone was shattered. The beast had won. Knowing this, I had a rendering created using neural scanning technology to recreate perfectly how he looked to me. I hope that, as you see his face, you know him to be truly real, and just another one of the great beings that lurks in the shadows, just beyond the edge of what science has begun to understand. This is for you, Grand Peepaw. Your memory remains forever immortalized as one of the greatest mysteries of our time.